deal. Finance ministers from the G20 member countries came together in Venice, including China, the US, and Germany. The group represents the world's largest economies, and it now has a common goal: to set a minimum tax rate for companies of at least 15%.
The minimum taxation is a real great advantage for democracy and for fairness in global taxation, and it will give us a chance to end the race to the bottom. Now, just after we are fighting against COVID-19 and we are taking a lot of debt to fight against the health crisis, to fight against the economic crisis, it is absolutely necessary that we take this step, and I'm really, really happy that we are that far.
Almost every OECD country had already planned to ask major international corporations to pay what they called their fair share. Take Amazon, for example. Business boomed in 2020 during the pandemic. In Germany alone, they saw a 33% rise in sales. But the online giant has not paid any corporate tax. That's because it pays its taxes for all of its European business in the low-tax country of Luxembourg. Amazon is shifting a large part of the profits they make in Germany to Luxembourg, where it pays less than 15% in tax. From Luxembourg, the profits then go on to the US. If a minimum tax rate comes in now, Amazon would have to pay 15% in Germany, 15% in Luxembourg, and at least 15% in the US. But German corporations, like car manufacturers, will also have to pay taxes wherever they do business going forward. The EU wants a similar tax treaty across the whole EU, but so far Ireland, Hungary, and Estonia are resisting it. There are protests against the G20 in Venice too. Should a minimum tax agreement be reached there, the pressure on those who don't pay would only increase.
I'm now joined by DW's Bernd Riegert, who is in Venice at a G20 meeting. Bernd, why this agreement now?
Well, the G20 countries need money after the COVID crisis. They want to generate up to 150 billion euros more revenue per year. You have to see if these estimates are correct. But anyway, there's the window of opportunity to do it now because Janet Yellen, the new US finance minister, is also pushing for this now. And she's betting on international cooperation. Now, this is new. The Trump administration didn't do that. And also there's an appetite to design a new tax system for the digital age to get out money from Google and other internet giants.
So what will this mean for developing countries that might want to attract more investments with low taxes?
Well, tax havens in developing countries have to come up with a different business model now. They will not go out of business, but there must be other means to attract businesses, and there will also be some carve-outs for poor countries in this new system. But in general, almost every tax haven subscribed to this plan under the OECD rules. Only a few, like Nigeria or Barbados or Ireland, are not on board yet.
So explain a bit more to us, how will this agreement be implemented?
Well, this is not a new law which can be just implemented in the countries. It's an international agreement that has to be transcribed into national law, and the countries now are pledging that they will do that. There are some difficulties, especially in the United States, where the Congress, with its Republican opposition, has to agree to this deal. But Janet Yellen, the US finance minister, said she's very optimistic that this can be done. And the beauty of the system is you don't need anybody on board. They can just start. They don't have to wait for Ireland or Hungary or other holdouts. So the system is designed to start in 2023.
DW's Bernd Riegert in Venice. Thank you.
Ganz am Anfang meiner Motorradkarriere gehabt habe, nämlich einfach pure Angst.
새로 나온 농축 카구리.
Oh,
no.
sorry. That's the thing is, make sure you turn the scales on.
Okay.
All right, how many we got there? 2,000.
Yeah, we still have a bit more to
Okay,
go.
go. Fill them up. Fill them up.
So why are we filling up jars though?
We're trying to explain why a new global tax rate has been agreed by some of the world's biggest economies. In June 2021, the leaders of the countries that make up the Group of Seven, otherwise known as the G7, endorsed a deal to make multinational companies pay more tax. Governments have been trying to solve the challenge of taxing companies across many countries for a long time. And that challenge has only grown with the rise of huge tech corporations. So don't go over, because I'm about to start taking that.
Oh my God, so much pressure. She's been promoted to Executive Vice President.
CNBC's Sylvia Amaro covers European politics and macroeconomics. If she's not in London, you're likely to find her in Brussels. So there's a reason why we've done this, I promise. We filled up this jar to 5,000 grams. That's because we are working on a conversion rate of 1 gram to $10 million. So if we've got 5,000 grams, that is how much?
50 billion?
Correct. Well done, Sylvia. So $50 billion is how much Amazon made in revenue in Europe last year in 2020. But despite the record sales, Amazon's European headquarters in Luxembourg made a $1.4 billion loss and therefore paid no corporation tax to the Grand Duchy. Other big tech companies in recent years have also paid little corporate tax. Turnover for Facebook's UK outfit in 2019 was $1.4 billion, and yet they paid $51 million in corporation tax. In the 12 months ending in June 2020, Google's turnover in the UK was $2.3 billion, and they paid less than $70 million in corporation tax. So now it's your turn to explain to us why that is and how a new global tax rate is going to change them. Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and Microsoft are some of the world's biggest tech companies. This graph shows their total revenue in the US was more than $4.6 trillion between 2010 and 2019. Their declared profits were $1.1 trillion, and the tax they paid was $180 billion, which means they paid a 16.2% tax rate during that time. Given the US had a 35% federal corporate income tax rate for most of that decade, the gap in tax paid with the expected headline rate is more than $155 billion. What's going on here, Sylvia? Why aren't these companies paying more in taxes?
Well, first of all, they are paying the tax that they are supposed to pay. The core problem here is that there are different tax rates across the globe. And when you are a global company, you have the means to change your headquarters in a way that you pay less tax. And so it just makes sense from an accounting perspective. So this new tax deal aims to change things in two ways. First, companies will have to pay tax where they operate and not just where they have their headquarters. So that is a big change already. And then the second thing here is that they want to implement a corporate minimum tax rate of 15%. And the idea there is to prevent countries from undercutting one another.
One of the ways organizations can reduce their tax is through corporate profit shifting. This is where businesses set up their headquarters and create local branches in countries with low corporate tax rates and declare profits there. For example, the UK has a corporate tax rate of 19%. So a business could move its headquarters from the UK to the Isle of Man, where there is a 0% corporate tax rate. The company could then book its profits in the Isle of Man and pay no tax, even if the profits mainly come from sales made elsewhere. To attract business and stay competitive, one country after another have been making significant cuts to their own rates, including members of the G7.
For too long, there has been a global race to the bottom in corporate taxes, where countries compete by lowering their tax rates instead of the well-being of their citizens and natural environments.
Okay, hi everyone. And so let me go to the Cyber Campus and to the policymaking in the European Union and make sure that that's ready to go. So make sure you can see that and go to share screen, and there we go. And we go to attendance, and here we are in week 10. Okay, add week 10, smart attendance, and your number is 378. 378 is your number. And 378, so I'll put that in the chat. And there you go, 378. All right, so so you saw those videos I was showing about the corporate tax rate. And in terms of how that relates to the European Union, you know, the European Union, since it really began to develop into the European community, has really emphasized its desire to expand what it calls the rule of law in not only in Europe, among the states of Europe and the peoples of Europe, but the rule of law across the entire world, the rule of law. So if you go to the European Union website over the years, since I've been following the European Union since the early 1990s to the present, their material on the European Union website always emphasizes that the European Union supports the rule of law in international affairs, the rule of law in international affairs. And as far as I can tell, what that means is that if they support the use of international institutions, international organizations to address and resolve disputes, that they want to basically expand the European Union system or the European Union type emphasis on creating institutions that facilitate cooperation, collaboration, coordination among all 200 member states of the world, because there's about 200 states in the international United Nations system, right? And there's 27 member states in the European Union, but there's about 200 states in the United Nations. That they would like to see that expand the way they do business in the European Union to the rest of the world. Now, you might say that this is, you know, an element of European pride, and I'm sure it is. There is an element of European pride in that. But given how big the European Union economy is, and its the reliance upon the European Union member states upon international trade and commerce, just not only between each other, but with the rest of the world, right? I mean, I think, you know, United States is one of the European Union's biggest trading partners. And so also is Japan, a very important European Union trading partner. Of course, the point is that the advanced developed countries, the industrialized states, they do most of their business with other industrialized states. They do most of their trade with other advanced industrialized states, not with the oil producing countries like Saudi Arabia. I mean, of course, they do a lot of business with Saudi Arabia and with Russia. I mean, the European Union imports, I think, $450 billion worth of oil and gas from Russia every year. But when you look overall, by far, the European Union does more trade and business with other really advanced industrialized states like the United States and Japan and increasingly South Korea. And so if they're going to coordinate to address common issues, that they have to also consider how the European Union member states can try to persuade the United States and Japan and South Korea and increasingly China to also coordinate their economic policies, so that, for example, if the European Union member states attempt to put carbon dioxide restrictions, greenhouse gas limitations on products imported in the European Union or developed in the European Union, they have to come up with some kind of agreements with Russia, with China and the United States and Japan regarding importing from those countries products that might not be using really important efforts to limit the production of greenhouse gas emissions, so they have a competitive advantage. Those products that are made in the United States, for example, that if they're not required to limit the amount of carbon dioxide, greenhouse gas emissions those products produce in the course of their production and manufacturing in the US, that somehow European manufacturers would have a disadvantage. So the point is that even as the European Union is attempting to come up with a common single market, and you're reading this week on the single market, that they also have to be concerned about the relationship of that single market with the rest of the world. And since they're so interdependent with the other industrialized states like the United States, they are increasing their collaboration, cooperation, and efforts to coordinate with the United States and the other countries of the world to address the problems that the member states of the European Union faced earlier in trying to create the single market that really picked up in the 1980s, the effort to create the single European market. And so, for example, this issue, for example, of coming up with a common taxation rate, So that's I want to, there's been late breaking news developments regarding these efforts to come up with a common taxation rate. Let me just go ahead, however, we'll talk a bit about the notes that you're reading for this week. And so let me open up chapter 12, single market. And keep in mind that the European Union has always been concerned about the relationship of the European Union economy with the international economy. But as the level of interdependency among the member state, among the world economies increases, it becomes more and more immediate that they have to almost immediately think about how their own efforts to come up with a single or harmonized set of policies to create a single market. And remember, it's really difficult. It's hard, long work to come up with policies and regulations across 27 member states that are different, with different histories and different backgrounds, to create a single market, which means a single set of rules and regulations governing behavior, competition behavior, economic behavior among those member states. And now, not only do they have to worry about those 27 different member states, but they also have to always take into consideration now, for example, what are United States rules and regulations? How are they going to export and import from the United States if the United States is not doing enough to regulate, for example, greenhouse gas emissions, or China, and giving Chinese and American manufacturers an advantage, a competitive advantage possibly, in regard to German manufacturers, if American manufacturers don't have to spend more money on pollution control in their production, for example. So let me go to the single market notes. So I think you can see those notes and make sure that you can. So let me go back again to screen share, and here you see it. Okay, so the single market, and keep in mind, right, that this is a peace strategy. The European Union is a strategy for peace in Europe that began by emphasizing economic integration and promoting economic interests that would lessen the intensity and salience of nationalism among these countries that of course most recently went through this intensely nationalistic conflict, World War II, that saw genocide in Europe, and the creation of the monetary union, economic and monetary union, is in some sense the culmination of that effort to create the single market. Because it seems to me for fall 2021, one of the lessons I've learned from this semester is that creation of economic and monetary union, that really is now appearing to have been a truly critical phase in the development of European integration. I mean, nothing is impossible, never say never, but it just seems now that the economic costs of a country leaving the Eurozone, the 19 countries in the Eurozone, the economic costs of any of those countries leaving the Eurozone and causing a disruption to the Eurozone and would be so economically and costly and so politically consequential that it seems to be, I almost said inconceivable. It is conceivable, but it would be such a cataclysm, such a catastrophe that the European Union has succeeded, beginning with the creation of the coal and steel community, and then the European community, and then in the 1980s, the re-emphasis to create the single market and that acceleration of that to lead finally to economic and monetary union among the member states, that it would be such a cataclysmic event for any country to leave the Eurozone that it's not going to happen unless we're at a cataclysmic point in world history, equivalent to the greatest catastrophes in recent history. And that only became clear, I think, in the last 12 years, with the Greece sovereign debt crisis, the response of the European Union, particularly the response of the European Union to develop more greatly the European Central Bank, give it all sorts of de facto powers, and with the coronavirus pandemic and the development of next generation European Union, which indicates that the emergence of a central government based upon economic and monetary union that will begin to act more and more like a government with fiscal policy, because as the European Union borrows hundreds of billions of euros from investors on the basis of the economic and monetary union and the European Union as with its own currency, that basically through the development of its offering euro bonds, that we see the European Union institutions are increasingly developing their own fiscal policy, because typically you have monetary policy, which is what the central bank of your country, or the central bank of Europe, the European Central Bank, or the central bank of Belgium or South Korea or United States, the Federal Reserve, that is, they issue currency and they set interest rates. And then there's fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the policy of the government in terms of taxation and spending. And the European Union is not really developing its taxation levels as much yet as it has developed its expenditure levels. I mean, it's going to, like we said, for example, the next generation European Union, it's going to spend hundreds of billions of euros that are going to be borrowed from other investors. And that has emerged in the last year. So as I mentioned, it's not really mentioned in your textbook. As I noted, it's not really discussed in your textbook at all. And now you see this effort to come up with a common taxation rate for corporations, so that Google and Alphabet, Google's parent company's Alphabet, but still really Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Netflix, Amazon, that these companies are going to pay a set rate of taxation among all of the developed countries. And the European Union has been promoting this, and well, let me stop there. So the point is that you can imagine that money, that set taxation rate that they're going to put on these multinational corporations, that's going to generate income, and that income is going to be overseen and monitored by the European Union institutions, together with the member state governments, of course, because the member state governments are going to be always involved in partnership with the European Union institutions. But somehow because of this is happening under the coordination, collaboration, and cooperation of the European Union, that we're seeing the emergence of a co-financing system whereby the European Union is becoming a partner with the member states, a major partner with the member states in fiscal policy, in spending money, as well as taxing money. And yeah, sure, I mean, you're going to still see France and Italy and Germany and Ireland are still going to be primarily responsible for gathering taxation. But in terms of spending that money, it's going to be directed by the European Union, insofar as the European Union is exploiting and utilizing European Union's economic bond capabilities and currency capabilities as part of fiscal policy, to get loans to spend money. And so one of you made that point in your midterm essay, which I thought was really quite interesting, that you mentioned that person, I can't remember exactly who it is, that the European Union, emergence of a European Union identity will be a different process because there's a different starting point, right? France began as the Kingdom of France from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, primarily, a medieval kingdom based upon agriculture and serfdom, overwhelmingly agriculture. But the European Union is building upon the framework of modern industrialized European states. So it's a different starting point in creating a European Union identity than, say, a French identity or a German identity. And so, how you go about creating a European Union fiscal policy will be different as well. Because it's built upon pre-existing advanced industrialized states to create something that uses those advanced industrialized states as the building blocks of a new structure, that you put the building blocks together in a special coordinated ways to create something that is more than the sum of its parts. Like this building, Catholic University of Korea building, it has bricks, it has walls, but it's more than just a pile of bricks. You put the bricks together and you construct something in a particular way, and you create something that is more than the sum of its parts. And that's something what we're seeing with the European Union. But the European Union is starting with different construction materials than, say, the Kingdom of France began with 400 years ago in building France. So, again, I mean, I think, you know, in the last year has really shown the success of economic and monetary union and the major strides that are being made in creating this European Union as an actor. So you meant, so this is the chapter overview. You know, these are the notes. So we can go through them quickly here. European integration has always been a function of economic integration, right? So economics is the vehicle for trying to encourage attitudes, political attitudes of cooperation, coordination, and communication. One of the consequences of which is to lessen the suspicion and fear that has fed European nationalist conflict over hundreds of years. So at the beginning, of course, the European Union aimed to promote peace and prosperity through economic efficiency, of course, greater economic efficiency, but also by promoting transparency and a sense of interdependence. I mean, I think that was also mentioned in some of your midterms, that liberalism really emphasizes promoting an awareness of the fact of interdependency. And the European Union certainly is promoting awareness of the fact that these countries are interdependent with each other. And so they have to be concerned about each other's well-being because it relates to their own well-being. And that's always been true, but the question is, are you aware of it? And European Union tries to make that process aware among the elite and among the attentive public of the European Union. So even the book does highlight the euro is really significant, even though still only 19 members of the European Union of the 27 members use it, trying to lessen the economic, the political conflicts over economic and monetary union includes so-called cohesion policies, because, as I mentioned earlier, money tends to go where money already is. The biggest trade partners with the European Union are the other industrialized states. It's not the poor parts of the world. The poor parts of the world are still important for the European Union, right? I mean, they still need those products, but most trade and investment goes to where there's already more and more trade and investment. So within the European Union, there has to be a conscious effort. The decision was made, there has to be a conscious effort to encourage the poor regions and support the poor regions of Europe developing, so that, for example, if you're a Polish company or Bulgarian company that makes that produces food, are you really going to be able to compete with the high-tech French agro-industrial businesses like Danone that have the latest technology, vast factories, highly skilled technicians and workforces, not to mention the more developed in agricultural infrastructure to grow and produce the food that they then produce into all of the different elements that go into making the food industry? How is a Bulgarian post-communist food company like what was it? Bulgarplod was the name of the Bulgarian food production company inherited from communism. So, you know, these communist terms, these communist era state-owned firms, state-controlled companies, they typically took two words or three words from Russian or Bulgarian, if it was a Russian company or a Bulgarian company, and took the first syllables and put them together. So plodove is the Bulgarian word for fruit. Bulgarsky is the Bulgarian word for Bulgarian. So the company that was under communism responsible for gathering fruit and vegetables and canning and producing and selling it was Bulgarplod. How is Bulgarplod, after the end of communism, going to compete with Danone? Unless there is a political effort to help Bulgarplod one of the Polish companies was Hortex. Hortex was the Polish agricultural company, one of them that was responsible for gathering up Polish apples and Polish fruit and in the Polish from Polish farmers and making, you know, apple juice and boxing it and selling it in stores. Okay, so they try to become more efficient and effective after communism ends, but these companies cannot compete against Danone. Or, you know, you tell me in Belgium, since Maria is from Belgium, what are the big Belgian food companies? How are they going to compete with these Belgian food companies that are so modern, so big, right? So there has to be effort to encourage these companies and also the poor regions within these countries to develop, not partly in order to prevent a political explosion out of resentment about basically neo-imperialism of the rich industrialized countries, just destroying the new, young, relatively comparatively inefficient post-communist countries and companies in Bulgaria and Poland and so on. So that's why this term cohesion, it refers to basically political cohesion, that you need to equalize or lessen the differences between the rich and poor parts of the European Union if you want to maintain the political commitment within these countries to cooperating, coordinating, and collaborating within the European Union, including creating a single market. And so one word just sums it up: cohesion policies, which is basically trying to lessen the income differences between the poor and rich areas. And of course, with the expansion into Eastern Europe, the differences in income between the poor and the rich became even wider. I mean, when I was in Poland, I was told that, you know, that Poland's per capita gross income per person in Poland was half what it is in Spain, half what is considered the average in the European Union in terms of per person income, per capita income, per person economic income. Poland's was half the average of the European Union, which is about half of that of Spain. Now, Poland, of course, has been growing and developing more rapidly than the other countries, the rich countries in the European Union, but that's partly because of these cohesion policies. And you got a sense of that when we covered that last class, right? That what did they say in that news report? That Poland has received, since it joined the European Union in 2004, so 17 years ago, Poland has received $255 billion from the European Union in terms of cohesion policies, in terms of agricultural support policies. That's a not insignificant, that's a significant sum of money for a poor country where, you know, a dollar or a euro has a big impact, much bigger impact in those poor countries than it might have in, say, Germany or Belgium. And as a consequence, Polish economy has been changing, but it's not, but politically it's still unsettling and disturbing to Polish people when, you know, I mean, as we mentioned earlier, right, that about 1/3 to 1/3 of the Polish population, they are just doing so well with European integration and globalization. Young people, people with college degrees, people who can speak English, people like you in my class. Globalization, Europeanization, you're doing well, but you know, you are not a majority of the society, right? And there are lots of people my age who didn't go to college in Poland, who do not speak English or German very well, and their factories are closing because their factories are inefficient, communist era factories. The agriculture is too inefficient, so people can't make money on agriculture, so they have to sell their land and retire. There are a lot of people who are just, they had big dreams. They were told in Bulgaria and Poland and in Hungary that when they joined the European Union, the world would become so much better for their country. Of course, it was wishful thinking. It was exaggerated in the midst of political combat and competition with these countries. I mean, I saw it myself, you know, when I was in Bulgaria, that before Bulgaria joined the European Union, that when Bulgaria makes these difficult policy changes to overhaul completely the economy and the laws inherited from communism, that this is all part of returning to Europe, Bulgaria joining Europe, Bulgaria returning to Europe. And when we finally succeed, it will be very challenging, but when we join the European Union, Bulgaria will become a happy country, prosperous and happy. Because, you know, when we think about Europe, we think about Belgians, we think about French, we think about Germans, we think about Italians, that's what a European lifestyle is like. And so when Poland joins the European Union, or when Bulgaria joins the European Union, we will become like Western Europe. And of course, it didn't happen for the majority of the population. And they're not happy. They live in a world of anxiety and fear, of a lot of corruption. You know, if you want to get poorly paid government civil servants to do something who are employees of the government, and the government doesn't have a lot of money, and these people are working for the government, and they know how people in Western Europe live. So, you know, if you want to get something done in Poland or Bulgaria, you might well have to bribe somebody. You've got to bribe people. You're working hard. You're trying to do whatever you can, and you're just surviving. You're just surviving. You're not making your life better. Yeah, 1/3 of the population, up to 1/2 the population. Yeah, man, they're doing great. But at least half the population is just not dying, is just surviving, despite being in the European Union for 17 years. And they're not happy about it. And they resent those people that are being successful, and they look for reasons to justify their envy and resentment, saying, well, it's because their families, collaborate with the communists, looking for scapegoats. So it's the Jews' fault. They're the traditional scapegoats, right? To stereotype the Jews, or the Gypsies. The Gypsies are parasites, the Roma population. Those parasites are that's the reason why my country is corrupt, and my life is not as happy as I want it to be. It's because of the Jews and the Gypsies and the former communists. And if you're a politician, you're trying to win elections, you're trying to get votes, you appeal to people's emotions. So it's often a tendency of politicians to manipulate and exploit stereotypes and these sentiments, because, you know, emotions emote, emotions motivate, emotions grab people's attention. And so, and that's the nature of politics. So the European Union began as the European Economic Community, and then in the 1960s, it broadened to become a customs union, international trade. So that's important, because that means that they have to come up with a common set of tariffs for interacting as the European Economic Community with the United States or Japan in terms of trade and commerce. And if you're going to come up with a common set of tariffs and rules for trade, then it pushes you further through neo-functional spillover to come up with a common set of European Union internal policies for developing your economy so that you can more readily come up with a common set of single tariffs and international trade policies, right? And so, then in the 1970s, the European Economic Community members moved to cooperate in building a common economic policies and establishing currency exchange rate stability. So back when France had its own money, the franc, and Italy had the lira, and West Germany had the Deutschmark, there was the effort made to try to work to keep their currencies at a relatively stable rate. And again, why? Partly because if you want to try to create a single market, you need to encourage French companies to be actively involved in investment and sales throughout the whole European Economic Community. And that means you have to want to encourage stability and support confidence in the value of the relative values of the lira versus the Deutschmark versus the franc, so that your business people, the people that are buying and selling in the single market across the boundaries of the European member states, European Economic Community member states, they know pretty much how much profit they're going to make, or can predict how much profit or their revenues will be, because they can pretty much assume that there won't be too much change in the relative value of the French franc to the Italian lira to the German Deutschmark. Right, this is all that neo-functional spillover. And then in the late 1980s, not coincidentally with the end of the beginning of the end of the Cold War, they launched their initiative to complete the creation of the single market within the European Economic Community. And then they were also committed themselves to taking steps to adopt in 1999 the single currency, the euro. And again, with the pandemic and the response, again, we are seeing that this is really significant. And these changes have affected the entire world, as well as the lives of the individual EU citizens. So today, the EU is the largest trading power in the world, along with being the wealthiest marketplace. With just 7% of the world's population, still it's the biggest market, and it's the wealthiest marketplace. And so that means the US and China and Japan and South Korea, they all want to do business with the European Union. And this encourages cooperation, collaboration, coordination among the member states, among the world community, not just among the member states. And so because for reasons we already described, right? The countries, the companies in these countries that are making trade and investment and exporting and importing from around the world, they want to be able to predict and be confident in their predictions about what will the world trading environment, economic environment look like 1 year, 5 years, 10 years from now. And this danger that we saw among these countries trying to encourage investment by these rich corporations in their country to provide jobs and taxation led to a tendency among these member states, not among the member states, but among all of the world, but particularly even among the European Union member states, to try to attract investment into their country by reducing corporate taxation. And Ireland was the country that was the main high profile figure country of a poor country, because Ireland used to be really poor, until the second half of the 20th century. Ireland was the latter part of the 20th century. Ireland was a poor country. And, I remember in the 1980s, we talked about the four tigers, right? The four tigers were South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong. And then after the 1980s, the word came out about the Celtic tiger. And the Celtic tiger was Ireland. That Ireland was growing at high economic growth rates, at least according to accounting standards. Ireland was growing at rapid economic growth rates. And one of the ways by which Ireland, this little country of 4.5 million people, was growing at such high rates was that they were really encouraging corporations to invest in Ireland, because if they invested in Ireland, or at least did some of their business chain of production or activities in Ireland, that they would pay low taxation rates. And this was a critical part of Ireland's effort to attract investment in Ireland, and it worked. Ireland, before the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, the real estate prices in Ireland were amazing. They were as high as they were in London, and London was among the most expensive real estate in the world. So, we were hearing these amazing stories about the price of real estate in Dublin, the capital of the Republic of Ireland, because so much money was coming into Ireland. And of course, Ireland and Poland, these countries that have been subject to colonialism and imperialism, resented being told by the British or the Germans that, you guys are trying to develop in ways that are not fair. You're not taxing your corporations, or you're making it too easy for companies to do their set up operations on, at least on paper, in your country, and because they are not really paying any taxes by doing that, because we can't tax them because they've set up a headquarters in Ireland, and you in Ireland have made it very easy to set up such a headquarters. And even though they're not really doing much business in Ireland, and the Irish would react very strongly. They get very emotional about this. That, well, you know, we were subject to British imperialism and colonialism for all of those centuries, and it made us poor, and so few people live in Ireland because the British policies were so terrible to the Irish, and so we are not going to let you tell us what we have to do to catch up with the rest of Europe when Europe abused us so badly in the form of Great Britain. And that's what Poland is saying, and that's not just Poland. Hungary, Estonia, all of these other countries were also copying the Irish model of offering very low corporate taxation rates to encourage corporations to do more and more business in those countries, and not just Estonia and Hungary, but also, for example, Luxembourg. I mean, Luxembourg built an entire economy on favorable taxation rates. Switzerland as well. But when they were criticized, when these countries like Estonia and Hungary were criticized, they responded in the same way that Ireland did. That, you know, we're trying to make up for lost years and generations due to the evil of communism and the domination by outside powers telling us what to do in the case of the Soviet Union. And so European Union, you must not act like the old Soviet Union and try to tell us what to do, because we're not going to tolerate that. And so, yeah, so let me go to an exercise. And so my question to you is, and so let me go here and go here. And so, so please respond to the following statement. The European Union, along with all the world's industrialized countries, will adopt a common baseline corporate taxation rate so that corporations do not create artificial foreign subsidiaries to pay the lowest national taxation rates they can find. So that's what they've been doing. If I can find the article here, that I think it says you can see that, but I'm not so certain. So let me go ahead and share screen again. So here you see, how do you respond to this? The European Union, along with all the world's industrialized countries, will adopt a common baseline corporate taxation rate so that corporations do not create artificial foreign subsidiaries to pay the lowest national taxation rates they can find. So, for example, Apple, you know, that I'm using an Apple MacBook Pro computer right now to talk with you. They set up a headquarters in Ireland on paper. So they're officially headquartered in Ireland. So Big Apple pays very low taxation rates because they claim that they're headquartered in Ireland, not in the United States. Because the Irish really encouraged companies to do that, to, you know, get at least some of the benefits of being integrated into a huge multinational corporations, accounting, organization, to some degree manufacturing. I mean, at one point, I mean, Ireland's economy after the global financial crisis in 2008, it grew almost 24% one year. Why? Because Apple recovered from the corporate downturn, and because Apple is officially on paper headquartered in Ireland, that translated into a growth in the Irish gross domestic product of something like 24%. In 2011, 2012, incredible rate. Of course, it's all artificial. It's all artificial because of Apple's response rebounding from the Great Recession that began in 2008. So do you think that all of the countries of the industrialized world will be able to come up with a common agreement that all the corporations of the world will pay at least, there will be no lower, there'll be a common baseline, one set limit on the lowest amount of taxes a corporation can pay anywhere in the world, so that these corporations will not try to shop around and look for the lowest taxation rates and play countries off against each other? Do you think that the industrialized countries, and of course that's led by the European Union. I mean, the European Union has 27 countries. It's the biggest market, wealthiest economic market in the world. Do you think that the European Union will be able to persuade Ireland and Estonia and Hungary, as well as other countries like Switzerland I think China as well, that they will be able to come to a common agreement on a baseline global corporate taxation rate. So please respond. Do you agree or disagree? And since we only have 10 minutes left, maybe I will just do this quickly here. Go back to, I'll put you in 2 breakout rooms. Assign automatically. So please join your rooms and tell me where you fit on this scale. Your group fits on this scale. So Kang Tong-un, Marie, Owen Tech, and heads, the first person in the group will speak. And I'll flip this coin. And it is tails. So the bottom person in the group will speak. So Owen Tech and UJE will speak for these groups. So talk to each other and tell me if you think that they will succeed, as they've been talking about, they will succeed in persuading Ireland, Estonia, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Japan, South Korea, United States, to actually implement and change their laws. They have to change their domestic laws. The domestic law of the United States, of Ireland, of Estonia, of Hungary, of Japan, of South Korea, that there will be a minimal level common among all of these industrialized countries that will be a baseline for corporate taxation so that corporations can't move around looking for a country that has a lower taxation rate because they all have a limited, a lowest taxation rate. Well, that will never change, right? Because that's the point, that you can't expect, if you're a corporation, that this will change. So it has to look like it's a firm commitment of all of these countries, which means it has to be incorporated into their laws. It can't just be Joe Biden saying, yes, I agree. That's not enough. The US Congress, the Belgian Parliament, the Italian Parliament, they've all got to pass laws so that if you're a company director, chief executive officer, that you say you know that you can't change this and it's set, and so you make your plans for investment and marketing and distribution on the assumption that these are the rules that will not change among the member state, among the world's developed countries, with the European Union, of course, playing a leading role here. And I will make a statement as well. So let me go to screen share. And heads, I'm 1 through 3, and it is tails. No, it's heads. Sorry, heads is 1, and it's heads. So I strongly agree. Okay. And so let's see what you have come up with. Okay, so who's going to speak first? Room 1 is heads. And it's tails. So room 2 will speak. And that is UJE. So UJ, what do you think? Where does your group fit on this scale?
The global minimum corporate tax rate aims to prevent multinational corporations from tax evasion while allowing governments to collect taxes on large technology companies. The Irish government recently refused to accept the 15 percent global minimum corporate tax agreed upon by OECD and the G20 the trend is somewhat different from the economic trend in most countries due to the COVID-19 incident.
Okay.
I'm not sure, Professor.
Okay, well, I mean, there is no certain correct answer here. This is also a setup for, I want to discuss what's actually going on after I hear your comments. And so the next person is Owen Tech. Where does your group fit on this scale, Owen Tech?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Honestly, we haven't completed on the topic. The question was so difficult. However, as I understand now, it will be difficult to agree on corporate taxes with other developed countries.
Well, it says here ahead of, so when was this? This was a few weeks ago. Ahead of Friday's meeting, negotiators have been grappling over the language of a joint statement describing the tax rate exceptions for certain kinds of companies in the implementation period, which some nations want to drawn out for years. European holdouts such as Ireland, Estonia, Hungary have been under intense pressure in recent months to join the agreement, which will require the approval of the 27 European Union countries. And so let me, before I tell you what I heard today on the news, let me ask you to go ahead and vote. So you have 15 seconds to vote. I think you can see that screen share. And so you're done voting, I guess. Oh yeah, I think you are. Okay. So 3 are neutral, cannot decide, and 1 is disagree. It was announced today. I haven't looked into it. I heard it on the American news media that at the G20 meeting, that they did come up with a common statement on a common corporate taxation rate. US President Joe Biden said it was agreed, and that they've all agreed, including, I guess, Ireland and Estonia and Hungary, that they were persuaded to come up with a common base corporate taxation of 15%. Now, they issued that statement. Now it has to be somehow implemented and adopted by the countries themselves, by their governments, presumably by their parliaments, by their assemblies. But it was announced that they did agree. And I assume that includes South Korea, because they're in the G20, as well as Japan, as well as the European Union member states. Okay, that was just announced today, this morning, or last night, yesterday in the United States. So, all right, so then, okay, so let me go back then, and what else do I want to highlight here? So let me go back to the vote here. Also, I should mention that the United States agreed, it was announced today that United States and European Union will cooperate in reducing and eliminating tariff barriers on the basis of the amount of climate change pollution that steel exported between their countries, between the United States and European Union, that they will cooperate in coming up with a common tariff system and reduction on barriers to trade based upon how dirty the steel is, how much dirty carbon was produced, carbon dioxide, climate change gases were produced in making that steel. So again, and they specifically highlighted the so-called dirty steel from China. The Chinese steel involves using too much carbon, coal to make it. Coal is the dirtiest of the fossil fuels, that produces the most climate change gases in terms of carbon dioxide. So there is somehow a move, again, involving the European Union, United States, and I assume South Korea and Japan, that somehow that they're going to cooperate on using the effort to meet the challenge of global climate change to further collaborate, coordinate, and cooperate in coming up with international regimes for trade and commerce that are going to focus on meeting green, sustainable development, climate protection requirements. So you see this European Union effort to try to promote and encourage with its allies and partners, the United States, Japan, and South Korea, its own efforts to come up with a regional efforts to address collective problems. Okay, that's all we have for today. And so I will look at your paragraphs on Thursday. And let me see what the assignment is again. I think somebody's supposed to speak. No, again, we're just going to have regular in-class debate on Friday. Okay, that's it for today. Bye.
Thank you.